Aloha and welcome to Your Heart Magic, an illuminating space where psychology, spirituality and heart wisdom meet. Here's your host, Dr. BethAnne Wright, the clinical psychologist with a mystic mind.
Aloha, everybody. Welcome to Your Heart Magic. This is Dr. BethAnne Wright, and today we are doing a little bit of March magic and talking about the energy forecast for the month of March. I love doing episodes around what's the coming energy. I think it's really fun. It allows me to share from a more intuitive, mystic-minded part of myself. And one of my philosophies and ideas around looking at the energy is not because we're trying to predict what will happen or somehow know what's supposed to come before it's even happened. This isn't about fortune telling when we tune into what does the astrology say? What are the upcoming moons? What do the Akashic Records say about the month? It's more about a fluid interpretation of understanding that these are some of the greater cycles that we are living within and living under in more of a metaphysical sense, a cosmic sense, sometimes the natural world. Equinox is this month, so the earth is going through shifts. And I think part of intuitive living, part of living cyclically and learning to create a paradigm that is holistic, that is fluid, and that really understands that everything has a beginning and a middle and an end, but the end is really the beginning of something else, weaving into an ongoing story. I think it helps us live with more peace and ease, and it helps us find higher perspective when we get this itty bitty tunnel vision sometimes and get really stuck in a moment or stuck in a season or feel like the world is narrowing in and we're tempted to interpret something happening in our lives without some form of a greater context. And so we take this one isolated incident, or we take a hard month or even a hard season, and we form interpretations or judgments based on that might not be accurate and might reflect beliefs around negativity. Bad things always happen to me, or no matter what I do, nothing works out. And I think that part of understanding energy and understanding our relationship to the energies around us, and then our relationship to the energies in our life and what has informed our sense of self from a psychological and sociological perspective. Part of that is being able to understand ourselves not only as an individual in the moment, but within that greater context. So context is important, and that is part of the fun of looking at what is the energy for the upcoming month. That gives us a context to examine what might come to pass. So with that, let's dive in and talk all things March. March is actually an interesting month. It's a transitional month. It is the month of spring equinox for the northern hemispheres. It would be autumn equinox if you're in the southern hemisphere. I'm in Kauai. I used to be from Alaska, so I'm more tuned in to understanding the shifts right now through the northern hemisphere going into the spring interpretation. But I always want to make space and acknowledge our friends that join us from Australia and New Zealand and other southern hemisphere located countries and locations. Thank you for being with us. I'm so glad to have you here. But March itself, I've always found it to be an interesting month because sometimes I really like March. Sometimes I've had some really challenging Marches. Like if I go and I write down the March of last year and the year before that and the year before that, and just kind of make a list of some of the big themes and life events that happened for me during the month of March, it's not always been historically, for me at least, the easiest month. March itself is named after the Roman word Martius, and that is associated with Mars, the god of war. So I've always found this interesting. When I first learned this little bit of information, I thought, well, no wonder March sometimes feels really volatile or can feel a little bit tumultuous. That's big energy to have a month whose namesake is the god of war. And what's interesting is that March also marks the start of the astrological calendar year. We are finishing out Pisces season and we will move into Aries season on March 21st. And Aries is an astrological sign, an archetype that is associated with sometimes war, aggression, anger, impulse. It can also be associated with having the motivation to act and taking initiative and exercising our will. And if you follow along with any of the episodes here where we have been talking about archetypes and just talking about energies, we talk a lot about how nothing's neither good nor bad. There's always light qualities to any archetype, and there's always shadow qualities. So we could say the same for March. Just because it has a transitional energy, just because its namesake happened to be named after a deity that was really about going to battle and fighting for whatever they were fighting for at the time, doesn't mean that it has to be a month of tumult. It can also be a month of welcoming change, of moving ourselves in a new direction, of preparing for rebirth, of closing out things and beginning something. It can be a month of great action and energetic fluctuations. And when we learn to work with those, when we learn to keep our perspective as things shift around us, we are able to navigate changeful shifts, fluctuations in energy, life throwing us a curveball, and we're able to do it with a little bit more peace and grace and ease. So the Akashic Records said that the theme of March is what is to come. And when I was opening the Akashic Records for the Akashic Magic message for the month, what I first saw was ice cracking. And what was interesting about this, and I've shared before when I work with the records, one of the ways that information comes through is in images and metaphors. And with those images and metaphors, I will have feelings that come up. I'll have a sense of resonance. I'll often have a cognition or a thought or a illumination around what that image means. And when I was seeing the ice cracking, I was directed to not the cracking and breaking itself, but what happens when the ice breaks and all of a sudden it opens up and you realize that in the waters that were never fully frozen, just the top part was frozen, but underneath that, there is this vast world of sea life that has been moving around. And that is what I saw when I opened the records. The focal point was not so much on everything's breaking up, and it didn't feel like the focus was on like this cracking, violent tumult in the ice. It was really about what was under the surface, what was going on under the water the entire time. And there was metaphor after metaphor like that in the records for the month of March. And the guidance that came through was about this being a month where we start to catch a glimpse of what has been going on behind the scenes. And that's going to translate differently for each of us. I suspect for the collective, it will likely translate to having new information come to light about big world events or perhaps political scandal or something that we've wondered about and now it's leaked and we're starting to get new information. But my focal point for my work with the records, it's always on how do we take collective themes and apply them to us as the individuals. And it's less focused on what's happening within the socioeconomic political collective. So my idea was with the month of March, the record said that for each of us, the energy is going to translate differently, but all of us, almost all of us, can relate to feeling like we have been working on something, whether it has been trying to manifest a goal, take new steps forward, Maybe there's something intention setting that we're doing, something we have been trying to apply ourselves towards. Maybe we have just been doing a lot of inner work and we are ready to feel a sense of shift, are wondering, am I done yet? Is this complete? How much more do I have to do? And when will my inner work start to translate to the external world where I can see everything I've been working on inside of me start to show up? For example, if you were doing inner work around healing your relationship with, we'll say, abundance, and I mean abundance in a greater sense than just monetary abundance, but abundance meaning prosperity and material things and friendship, and seeing yourself as an abundant person, seeing yourself as somebody who has the capacity to manifest and to live an abundant life. Let's say you've been doing work around addressing all those messages that there's not enough time, not enough resources, you're not enough. And instead, you've been working on really owning and claiming that we live in an abundant universe, that spirit's love is always enough, the divine light in us is absolutely enough, and that we are, in fact, surrounded by so many riches and so many gifts, and we always have access to the greater universal flow. So let's just say, for example, you have been doing work around that, and a lot of it's been internal, and you've been doing journaling. Maybe you've done some chakra meditations. Maybe you see a therapist and you've been talking about ideas around self-worth and fear and those things. Maybe you work with somebody else and those are themes that are coming up. However, you're doing your work, this might be a month where you start to see the results of that pay off, and you see something happen in your tangible world that you could make a connection with and say, oh my gosh, that feels so magical. I wonder if that's a reflection of me shifting whatever it was that you were shifting inside of yourself. This feels like the kind of month where that stuff might happen. It feels like a month where we are better able to see, again, what's been going on behind the scenes. And the record said that it is highly likely that many of us will start to feel like we're seeing things come together. So take that however that resonates with you. And they gave this really fun metaphor of what if you were a worker somehow in a school play. Let's say you're a parent and you have a child and they're in the school play and you've been hearing about it for months. Maybe you help come up with a costume, or you help bring snacks one day, or you did something where you have some sort of involvement, but it's pretty periphery. You just know about it. You've been hearing the buzz about this upcoming play, and now it's opening night and you've never seen it. You never saw a dress rehearsal. You don't know what you're in store for. And the curtains start to pull back for the first time, and you are just taking in what you are seeing. You are taking in the costuming, you're taking in the set, you're taking in the actors, and you're taking in everything. And you see for the first time what it looks like. And just like on any opening night, parts of it will probably be amazing. And maybe something's going to go wrong because they're still working out the kinks, and somebody's microphone falls off, or somebody misses a cue. And you might notice, you might not. It depends on how well that can be covered up. Sometimes actors are very good at improving and you never know that you just saw a mistake. But either way, you are just taking in the whole. Taking in the good, taking in the bad, taking in the mistakes, and you're not judging the final outcome. You're appreciating the beginning. You're appreciating it coming together. You are focusing on the origin and focusing on seeing this tangible manifestation of all this hard work. And you know that there's still much, much more to come. That's the energy of March, according to the records. And we might think about that as watching a caterpillar slowly emerge from the cocoon. It's gone through the metamorphosis process. It is now a butterfly. and it's coming out of the cocoon for the first time. And it is unveiling and unwrapping these sticky layers and maybe starts to slowly move its wings. And you get to watch this miracle take place. And this isn't a butterfly that is soaring through the air magically yet. It is the beginning of this nature being realizing that it's no longer a caterpillar, it's metamorphosis into something else. And you get to watch it go down. That is this beautiful way that we might think about this month. So you can work with that, with thinking about things around what have you been beginning in your life? What are you hoping will come together? Is there anything that you have been working on in your inner world or anything that's really been a life theme coming up for you and you're hoping to see a shift? Those are great reflection questions. They're really good journaling prompts for this month. We start the month in Pisces season, and Pisces is an astrological archetype that really represents intuition, feelings.
Hey, I'm Chris from the Improving Daily podcast. If you value personal growth and you want to try to go and get better, I have just the podcast for you. I go and I talk about my real life examples, being able to go and teach you how to go and develop things like your relationship or becoming a better communicator or just personal growth all around. So if this is something that you value, definitely come and have a listen. Let me know what you think. I'm excited to go and be a piece of your guys' personal growth journey and help develop the best version of you possible. My info is going to be in the show notes, and if you want to look me up on social media, just look up Improving Daily Podcast for everywhere except for Twitter. It is #ImprovingDaily.
It is a water sign. So it's about being fluid, understanding our emotional waters, turning inwards. The light side of Pisces is that it is a season that supports heightened creativity, visualization, imagination, having dreams. We might feel more intuitive and really in touch with our dreams that we're having at night, or maybe we feel called to do a vision board or really see the bigger picture and see how we're interconnected to more than just ourselves, or maybe we just see the interconnections in our own life. The shadow side of Pisces is that it can be ungrounded. And so one of the ways that we might approach the month of March is to realize that there's really good opportunity right now for imagination and visualization and great creativity and huge emotional insights. But we might want to approach that energy with practicality and finding a way to ground it so that we don't go down a bunch of rabbit holes or get lost in illusion or lose our focus and focus on something that takes us from our path. So this ties in really well with something the Akashic Records said about this month, and that is to just take each day as it comes. Be adaptable, be fluid. Try not to get lost in looking at the final outcome or interpreting the whole. Instead, just work with the energy as it's showing up each day. Be like water and move in the direction that life's flows and currents are allowing you to go. There is a new moon in Pisces coming up on March 9th. New moons are always wonderful times to work with intentions, to work with beginnings. I love new moons if I'm trying to make a change or do like a 15-day goal, whatever it is. Let's say, for example, that I decide to do 15 days of meditation, and I'm going to do a 2-minute calming meditation every morning. I will often start that on a new moon or the day after a new moon, and I'll use the new moon itself to plant my intention, write it down in my journal, say some prayers around it, and then I will start my whatever it is that I'm wanting to work on the following day. So I love new moons as a time to really work with the energy of beginnings. And I love that that ties into what the Akashic Records said about March, that there's just this big focus this month on what is beginning. And when we're focusing on what's beginning, the other side of that coin is what have we shed? What is ending? How can we honor what we've just been through? How can we release the past so that we can move forward into a beginning with greater peace and presence and clarity? And that's not an on-off switch. Sometimes when we're talking about letting go of the past or shedding, I think sometimes we want to rush the process and feel like I'm going to do a big cord cutting ceremony and then I'm done with this thing. And sometimes we are, if it's something that's smaller, but if this is like a long time issue that we're working with, or we've been shedding an old identity or a relationship or an old long-term pattern in our life, we might do a lot of cord cutting ceremonies, and we might keep coming back to, have I shed any more from this? Is there anything else I need to let go of? Did I let it go and it was feeling really good and I accidentally picked it back up again and I kind of have it with me, so I need to re-let go? That's all good. That's okay. It's not always a one and done thing. Sometimes we come back and we release and let go, and we do it in layers and shades and bit by bit. But as you work with the month of March, you can think about, what am I letting go of and what I'm beginning in my life? And I love that that ties in with equinox, which is coming up on the 21st. Equinox, it's spring equinox in the northern hemisphere, and that is a time of balance. It's a time of looking at light and dark. It's a time where we are halfway through the winter equinox solstice, and it's the halfway point between that and the summer equinox. So it's the halfway point in between the two. And so we can think about themes of balancing the light and dark, looking at balancing energies in our life, looking at balancing if we have been in a space of shadows, if we've been doing a lot of intense work. You might think about, how can I bring more joy and more play and more light into my life right now? If you have been in a place where you have been having lots of play and perhaps not feeling especially grounded or responsible, but you had a lot of fun, then this might be a good time to think about, how do I anchor that? And how do I balance that out? And how do I bring more wisdom and more grounding into my life at this time? So this is going to be individual, but just look at the energies that have been showing up for you. Look at keywords, look at themes, and then think about, where do things feel out of balance, or how can I bring more balance into my life? Spring equinox also marks the beginning of the astrological wheel, the astrological new year, and it marks the beginning of Aries season. And Aries is a fire sign. It's all about I am, taking initiative, willpower. Like we said earlier, when the shadow side of it is coming out, it can be impulsive, it can be aggressive, it can be angry, sometimes self-centered and headfast. But when the power of that is harnessed in a way that we can tap into the light qualities of Aries, it allows us to move forward with confidence and bold action, and to take advantage of that fire energy and make steps and strides towards our goals, to find more courage and more spark to move ourselves in the direction that we want to go. So there's a lot of fun energy that can come up with that. And of course, this is all kicking off the start of eclipse season, which happens with the full moon on, I believe it's the 24th, towards the end of the month. And eclipse seasons are always about big transitions and shifts and changes. Usually eclipse seasons help us see major themes that we are working on in our life. And sometimes they afford us an opportunity to have a real sense of completion, or to make a huge shift, or to make a huge change, or have some sort of big insight. So we have a lot of changeful energy coming up this month. And again, the guidance from the Akashic Records is really about just appreciating the energy as it comes, letting go of the need to overinterpret and make some sort of final outcome judgment based on what we're seeing. I feel like there's such a growing point here for so many of us, because I think one of the things that we often stumble on quite a bit is we interpret something before it's ready to be interpreted. And we take information that has come up for us, whether it's circumstances that are happening for us or something that we're feeling. And sometimes we internalize that or shape it into a narrative that determines this final outcome when really we're in the middle of this story. Something that I think about often in my own life is if I were to sort of just drop in sometimes to certain chapters of my own story, and I didn't know the full story, I didn't have the context, and I just looked at the circumstances and where I was at and what was going on in my life, I might be tempted to come up with a conclusion that isn't entirely accurate. And sometimes when I have been in spaces in my life and I feel like, wow, this really isn't working out, or something is really off here, I will remember, like, what if you like dropped into any great story before it reached its conclusion, before it reached like the next chapter, and it looked like all was lost, but you don't know what's coming. You don't know that in the next chapter that the hero or the protagonist of the story is going to figure out some solution or find a tool, or somebody's going to come along and help them. There's this like surprise factor. And then the story takes this twist and it goes in a different direction. And I often remember that for our own journeys, that sometimes we want to interpret based on a moment. And it's like we don't know what's coming yet. So the focus this month is not on overinterpretation and having to know the final outcome of anything. It's on wonder and curiosity and staying open to the energy that's coming up and working with it the best we know how, and remembering that we are a story in progress throughout this entire journey. We actually never really know what's coming next, even when we think we do. And that beautifully wraps up, I think, and symbolizes the energy for the month of March. So thank you so much for joining me for today's podcast episode. We will be back next week, and we will be doing a talk story time episode where I will be sharing passages from my work and sharing some reflections and stories and ideas and thoughts behind some of the writings. So we will look forward to that. And until next time, happy March. Have an amazing week. Be well, be love, be you, and be magic.
You've been listening to Your Heart Magic with Dr. BethAnne Kapansky-Wright. Tune in next week for a new episode to support and empower your light.